The Chernobyl disaster, 1986, April 26, 1986, a day that changed history forever. A catastrophic explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine would become one of the worst nuclear disasters the world has ever seen. But what really happened that fateful night? And what were the consequences? To understand the disaster, we need to go back to the 1970s. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located in northern Ukraine, was one of the Soviet Union's largest nuclear energy projects. It housed 4 RBMK 1000 reactors, a design known for its instability at low power. But at the time, nuclear energy was the future, and Chernobyl was a symbol of Soviet progress. April 25, 1986. The Chernobyl staff prepared to conduct a safety test on Reactor 4. The goal? To see if the reactor could be cooled in case of a power failure. However, due to poor planning, miscommunication, and pressure from Soviet authorities to stay on schedule, operators ignored key safety protocols. 1:23 a.m. The test went horribly wrong. The reactor's power levels dropped too low, and operators tried to compensate by removing control rods, devices meant to regulate the nuclear reaction. This led to an unstable and uncontrollable surge of power. Then it happened. 2 massive explosions rocked Reactor 4, blowing off the reactor's 2,000-ton lid. A deadly fire ignited, and an invisible cloud of radioactive material began spreading into the atmosphere. The worst-case scenario had become a reality. Firefighters arrived within minutes, unaware of the invisible danger around them. They had no protective gear and faced lethal doses of radiation. Many of these brave first responders suffered agonizing deaths from acute radiation sickness within weeks. Meanwhile, Soviet authorities hesitated to acknowledge the severity of the situation. Even as radiation levels skyrocketed, residents of nearby Pripyat, just 3 kilometers from the plant, were not immediately evacuated. It wasn't until 36 hours later that the 50,000 residents were told to pack essentials and leave, never to return. By the time the Soviet government admitted to the world what had happened, radioactive clouds had already spread across Europe. The long-term consequences were devastating. Entire villages were abandoned, thousands developed cancer, and an area of over 2,600 square kilometers was deemed uninhabitable. In the following months, the Soviet Union deployed over 600,000 liquidators to contain the disaster. Their job? To clean up radioactive debris, build a concrete sarcophagus around Reactor 4, and try to minimize the catastrophe's impact. Many paid the ultimate price. Today, Chernobyl remains one of the most haunting places on Earth. While radiation levels have decreased, the exclusion zone is still largely abandoned, except for scientists, tourists, and a few elderly residents who refuse to leave. In 2016, a massive steel structure called the New Safe Confinement was placed over Reactor 4, designed to contain radiation for at least the next 100 years. But the question remains, can we ever fully undo the damage caused by the Chernobyl disaster? Chernobyl changed everything. It led to major reforms in nuclear safety worldwide. The Soviet Union, already struggling, saw its credibility damaged, and just a few years later, the USSR itself collapsed. The disaster taught us a painful lesson about the dangers of human error, government secrecy, and the need for stringent safety measures. Today, nuclear power remains a controversial topic, offering clean energy but carrying risks we must never forget. The Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, 1986. January 28, 1986, a day that started with excitement, hope, and anticipation, but ended in one of the most tragic disasters in the history of space exploration. The explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger shocked the world, leaving us with haunting questions, devastating loss, and crucial lessons. Today, we're diving deep into what went wrong and the lasting impact of this tragedy. The Challenger was one of NASA's space shuttles, designed to make space travel routine. This mission, STS-51L, was special. It included Krista McAuliffe, a schoolteacher who was set to become the first civilian in space. Her involvement captured the attention of millions, especially students who were eager to watch history unfold. Alongside McAuliffe, 6 other crew members, Francis Scobie, Michael Smith, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, and Gregory Jarvis, prepared for a journey that was meant to inspire the world. But beneath the surface, there were serious concerns. NASA had delayed the launch multiple times due to weather and technical issues. But the biggest red flag? The unusually cold temperatures on the morning of January 28th. Engineers from Morton Thiokol, the contractor responsible for the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, warned NASA that the cold could weaken the O-rings, critical seals designed to prevent fuel leaks. The engineers feared that the O-rings might fail, leading to a catastrophic disaster. But under immense pressure to proceed, NASA dismissed their warnings and gave the go-ahead for launch. At 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time, Challenger roared to life, accelerating into the sky. Families, teachers, and students across the country watched in awe as the shuttle climbed higher, until, just 73 seconds into the flight, the shuttle disintegrated in a horrifying fireball, live on television. Mission control fell silent. The world held its breath. And then reality sank in. Challenger was gone. All 7 crew members were lost. That evening, President Ronald Reagan addressed the grieving nation, delivering one of the most memorable speeches in U.S. history. NASA grounded the shuttle program and launched an investigation. The Rogers Commission, led by former Secretary of State William Rogers, uncovered shocking truths. The O-rings had indeed failed due to the cold, allowing hot gases to escape and cause the explosion. Even worse, NASA knew about the flaw long before the launch. Engineers had identified O-ring erosion in previous missions, but warnings were ignored in favor of keeping the shuttle program on schedule. The Challenger disaster forced NASA to make major changes. The shuttle program was redesigned with improved safety measures. The culture of go fever, the rush to meet deadlines at the expense of caution, was re-examined. And most importantly, the tragedy reinforced the need to listen to expert warnings. The 7 brave astronauts of Challenger will never be forgotten. They gave their lives in pursuit of knowledge, exploration, and inspiration. And while their mission ended in tragedy, their legacy continues to drive us forward. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill, 2010, $65 billion. April 20th, 2010. A day that changed the world forever. A massive explosion ripped through the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, leading to one of the worst environmental disasters in history. But what really happened that night? And how did it spiral into an 87-day catastrophe? Asterisk. The Deepwater Horizon was a state-of-the-art drilling rig, owned by Transocean and leased by BP. It was drilling an exploratory well called Macondo, located about 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana. The operation was meant to extract vast amounts of oil hidden beneath the ocean floor. Asterisk, but drilling in deep water is incredibly risky. The deeper you go, the more pressure builds up. If that pressure isn't managed properly, disaster can strike. Asterisk, on the evening of April 20th, 2010, something went terribly wrong. A blowout occurred, a sudden and uncontrolled release of oil and gas. It shot up through the drill pipe, igniting into a massive fireball. Asterisk, the explosion killed 11 crew members instantly and injured many more. Chaos erupted as the survivors fought to escape the burning eye after desperate evacuation efforts. The remaining crew members were rescued, but the rig continued to burn for 2 days before finally sinking beneath the ocean waves. Asterisk. Asterisk, but the nightmare was far from over. When the rig sank, it left behind a broken wellhead nearly a mile beneath the ocean's surface. Oil began pouring into the Gulf at an alarming rate, thousands of barrels per day. Asterisk. Asterisk, at first, BP and government officials downplayed the severity, estimating a small leak. But as the days passed, it became clear this was a full-blown disaster. Asterisk. Asterisk, BP attempted multiple ways to stop the leak. First, they tried to activate the blowout preventer, a safety device designed to seal the well in emergencies. Failed. Asterisk. Asterisk, next, they lowered a massive containment dome called the top hat over the leak, but it became clogged with ice-like crystals and was abandoned. Asterisk. Asterisk, desperate, BP then attempted a top kill by injecting heavy drilling mud into the well to plug it. That too failed. Asterisk. Asterisk, with no end in sight, millions of barrels of oil spewed into the Gulf over the course of 87 days. The spill devastated marine life, poisoned fisheries, and ruined coastal economies. It became the largest marine oil spill in history. Asterisk. Efforts to clean up the spill were massive but challenging. Skimming boats, controlled burns, and chemical dispersants were used to mitigate the damage, but nothing could undo the widespread destruction. Asterisk. Asterisk, after nearly 3 months of failed attempts, engineers finally succeeded in capping the well on July 15, 2010. Later, a relief well was drilled to permanently seal the site. Asterisk. But by then, over 200 million gallons of oil had already leaked into the Gulf. The aftermath of the disaster led to billions of dollars in fines and settlements. BP faced harsh criticism, and new regulations were introduced to improve offshore drilling safety. Asterisk. Over a decade later, scientists are still studying the long-term impact on marine life and coastal communities. Asterisk. Asterisk, the Deepwater Horizon spill was a wake-up call, an environmental catastrophe that reminded the world of the risks of offshore drilling. As we move forward, one question remains. Have we truly learned our lesson? Asterisk. The Airbus A380 program failure, $25 billion. It was the largest commercial aircraft ever built, the Airbus A380, a double-decker engineering marvel designed to revolutionize air travel. A flying palace offering unparalleled comfort, capacity, and range. But despite its groundbreaking design, the A380 turned out to be one of the biggest failures in aviation history. Today, we uncover what went wrong with the Airbus A380 and why it failed to live up to expectations. In the early 2000s, Airbus believed the future of aviation lay in massive aircraft, capable of carrying over 800 passengers. Airlines were expected to use mega-hubs like London, Dubai, and Singapore, with the A380 as the ultimate long-haul workhorse. But the aviation industry was shifting in a very different direction, and Airbus miscalculated its bet. Rather than relying on enormous aircraft shuttling passengers between major hubs, airlines began favoring smaller, more efficient twin-engine jets like the Boeing 787 and Airbus' own A350. These aircraft could fly long distances without the need for stopovers, allowing airlines to connect smaller cities directly. The A380's business model was already becoming obsolete. The A380 was incredibly expensive to operate, for massive engines consumed an enormous amount of fuel, and maintenance costs were sky-high. While airlines like Emirates made it work, most carriers struggled to justify the economics of such a huge aircraft. The A380's operating costs were significantly higher than smaller, more efficient jets. Even though it could carry more passengers, airlines found it difficult to fill every seat consistently, especially outside peak seasons. And then there were production issues. Airbus faced major delays due to manufacturing complexities, including mismatched wiring systems between different production facilities. These delays led to cost overruns, pushing the program billions of dollars over budget. Another challenge? Infrastructure. Not all airports were designed to handle an aircraft this large. The A380 required special gates, reinforced taxiways, and extended runways, making it difficult for airlines to integrate into existing operations. In 2019, Airbus officially announced the end of A380 production. Airlines had already started retiring their A380s, and demand had collapsed. The final nail in the coffin? The COVID-19 pandemic, which accelerated the shift towards smaller, more fuel-efficient aircraft. While airlines like Emirates continue to operate the A380, even they acknowledge its limitations. Many carriers have replaced their A380 fleets with more efficient aircraft like the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350. So, was the A380 a complete failure? Not exactly. It remains an engineering marvel and a beloved aircraft for passengers. But financially, it simply didn't make sense. Airbus learned valuable lessons, which they applied to their next-generation aircraft, ensuring future designs focused on efficiency rather than sheer size. The Airbus A380 will always hold a special place in aviation history. But in the end, it was a magnificent aircraft built for a future that never arrived. The subprime mortgage crisis, 2007 to 2008, $10 trillion. It was the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Homes lost, banks collapsed, and the global economy teetered on the brink of disaster. But what really happened? How did we get here? This is the story of the subprime mortgage crisis. In the early 2000s, the U.S. housing market was booming. Home prices were skyrocketing, and nearly anyone could get a mortgage. Lenders were handing out loans left and right, and Wall Street was making billions. But underneath this apparent prosperity was a time bomb waiting to explode. Enter subprime mortgages. These were home loans given to borrowers with poor credit histories. Since traditional mortgages required strong credit and steady income, lenders started offering riskier loans with little to no down payment, adjustable interest rates, and deceptive terms. The idea? Home prices would keep rising, and refinancing would always be an option. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. But why did banks and lenders take on such risky loans? The answer lies in something called mortgage-backed securities. Banks bundled thousands of these risky loans together and sold them to investors. Credit rating agencies, who were supposed to assess risk, gave these securities AAA ratings, even though they were filled with bad loans. Investors thought they were safe, and Wall Street made billions. For a while, this system worked. But there was one major flaw. Many of these loans had adjustable interest rates. When rates started rising, millions of homeowners saw their monthly payments double or even triple. They could no longer afford their homes. Defaults skyrocketed, and the entire system began to unravel. By 2007, the financial cracks were becoming clear. Big lenders like Countrywide and Washington Mutual collapsed under the weight of bad loans. Then, in September 2008, the unthinkable happened. Lehman Brothers, one of the largest investment banks in the world, declared bankruptcy. This sent shockwaves through the global economy. Stock markets crashed, businesses shut down, and millions of people lost their jobs and homes. Faced with total economic collapse, the U.S. government had to act. The Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury rushed to stabilize the banks, pouring billions into financial institutions to prevent further fallout. The controversial $700 billion TARP program was passed to bail out banks. Meanwhile, millions of Americans suffered. Foreclosures soared, retirement savings evaporated, and the Great Recession began. In the years following the crisis, new regulations were put in place, like the Dodd-Frank Act, to prevent another financial meltdown. But was it enough? While the economy eventually recovered, the scars of the crisis remain. Many Americans never regained their lost wealth, and trust in financial institutions was permanently damaged. So, what can we learn from the subprime mortgage crisis? First, unchecked greed and risky financial practices can have devastating consequences. Second, regulation and oversight are crucial in preventing financial catastrophes. And third, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. The 2008 financial crisis was a wake-up call. While the world has moved forward, the lessons of the past must never be forgotten. What do you think? Could something like this happen again? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and always look beneath the surface.